It's radical, but he's saying it's who you are in this world. It's what you do. I'm not telling you to go build for them some kind of a cognitive structure. I'm saying I want you to be my hands and my feet and my face in this very world. And so he kind of strips him down and says, give yourself. Do what I've been doing. That's what my ambassador is, which is very counterintuitive to us. I was kind of raised in a church that said that we were supposed to be proclaiming with our mouths all these things. We're supposed to be saying, and that would change people's lives. What I've noticed as an adult is that words have increased greatly in our world, haven't they? A lot of words out there. A lot of words out there. And our job isn't to throw words. Our job is to give ourselves. That's what Jesus is trying to say. But then he has some warnings for us. He says, look, I'm sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as wise as snakes and innocent as doves. There's a lot of animals in that verse, isn't there? Sheep, wolves, snakes, doves. Obviously, he's giving these metaphors of the sheep as the vulnerable ones. He says, you're going to be vulnerable because you're going in my name. And what did Jesus do? He set his power aside. You're going to be vulnerable, and you're going to go into wolves, which is an image of predators. Not going to be all that safe. And then he says, I want you to be as wise as snakes and as harmless as doves. The snake was a slithery kind of thing that they always thought about from the first chapters of Genesis, the one who was a deceiver, who could outsmart you and could turn your words around. So there was this kind of mythology for them that snakes are smart. I looked it up on Google, and they're not really any smarter than other animals. But that was kind of their image then, okay? And doves, of course, were a totally different kind of animal. They were animals that were kind of weak in some ways, but they took on all kinds of meaning over the years. The dove was something very precious in the Old Testament when they brought their sacrifices. And of course, in the New Testament, the dove took on the meaning of God's Spirit in us and took on the meaning of peace. So Jesus is saying, I want you to be as wise as snakes, but as innocent as doves. Now, I got to be honest with you. I don't like that translation, innocent. That's the common translation, but that kind of, guilt, innocence, that kind of thing. The word is much deeper than just innocence. It can mean pure, but my favorite, most descriptive translation of it is the term guileless. Someone without guile. A guileless person or a pure of heart person is someone who's free from deception and slyness. They're sincere, they're straightforward, they're real. Do you realize that that's what Jesus calls us to? When you read, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God, we tend to think of purity of heart as this perfection in our lives. Oh man, we are the most perfect people, that we're pure, we don't ever do anything wrong, we never have any bad thoughts, and as we say we do nothing wrong and have no bad thoughts, we are lying, because we do things wrong and we have bad thoughts. So it's not perfection, it's transparency. It's this guilelessness that we are not people of deception. We are real people. And he says, that's how I'm sending you out. I want you to be wise because there's work to do. Sometimes you're going to have to speak truth to power. Sometimes you're going to have to call out things that are wrong. But I want there to be a guilelessness in you. Not that you are better than other people, but there to be a transparency in you. Now, of course, how do we do that? Actually, last week in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus taught us one way that we do that. It was, again, one of those statements that he made that was like, whoa, you got to be kidding me. It's when he said, you have heard it said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. Instead, if someone slaps you or strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also. What? I mean, come on. Don't resist an evil person. I thought we were supposed to resist evil. I thought we were supposed to do that. If someone strikes you, you say, I guess that's okay. We'll just keep doing it. No, that's not what Jesus was saying. He wasn't saying this literal thing that we're supposed to be doing. He was giving us, again, a metaphor that we don't always understand at our time, but it was very obvious to them. You see, in the first century, people were all right-handed. Not really, but they made them be right-handed, right? That's because the left hand was unclean. That's what you used for unclean tasks and things. And anytime you greeted someone, you used your right hand. You hear phrases in the Bible about the right hand of the Father. The right hand was the hand that you did the important things with. Now, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, it means they gave you a backhand. They used the right hand and they backhanded you, which means they treated you as someone inferior. They treated you as a slave. That's the way they treated their slaves. They slapped them around like that because the slaves weren't as good as them. Jesus said, if someone smacks you on the right cheek, turn the other one. What he was saying is, if someone treats you in a demeaning way, you say, no, I have value. I will not let you treat me in a demeaning way. The metaphor is, if you're going to hit me, you're going to at least hit me with an open hand. Again, he wasn't literally saying, take a bunch of abuse. He's saying that we're made in God's image, we are not demeaned. But not only will we not be demeaned, but we will not demean that other person. So he says, well, don't resist another person. He says, don't resist them in kind. Don't resist them the way they resisted you. Be better than that. In other words, don't become like your enemy. There's something about this that Jesus is saying, the dignity of all people, and the way that we are as wise as serpents is that we demand dignity for all people, and the way we are is as pure and guileless as doves is that we would never belittle someone else. We would never try to drag them down. We live in a world where people are always trying to do in the other person because they think their cause is always best. We talked about that some last week. We're the bad guys, we're the good guys, and so it doesn't matter what I do to be the good guy. No. Jesus says how you do is just as important as what you do, because I called you to be guileless, to be real, to allow me to work in your life. It's interesting that one of the things that Jesus is also saying is that when we do not become like our enemies, what we do is we are revealing evil. It is the turn the other cheek, and there's a couple more parables after that, the extra mile and the cloak and coat. He's saying that our realness, our guilelessness, our ability to love our enemy actually reveals evil for what it is. It unmasks evil. And the unmasking of evil was one of the great things that God did throughout Scripture through the prophets to show what was evil. And we don't unmask evil by being like evil. I love the passage in the Old Testament, actually in the New Testament, just making reference in Colossians, where it's talking about this Jesus Christ who set aside his power. And it says this, and having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them on the cross. This is such a great passage of Scripture because when they crucified Jesus, they thought they were making a public spectacle of him. They'd strip the person down naked, they'd humiliate them, they'd beat them, they'd say, look what'll happen to you if you step out of line. Crucifixion was not only a thing of intense pain, but it was a thing of intense shame. And they were saying, we will publicly make a spectacle. And Paul, right into the Colossian Christians, said, no, you don't get it. That's the way the culture thinks, but in giving himself and setting aside his power to be a destroyer, it says he made a public spectacle of evil when he was on the cross. So how do we fight lies? With truth. How do we fight slander? With love. How do we fight the great wrongs in our culture? Revealing them by trying to live the way that Jesus would want us to live. Being as wise as snakes and as guileless and as authentic as beautiful doves. Now, one of the things that I think is so important is that we see this in everyday life. Peter is the one one of the ones who was with Jesus, and he watched Jesus all the time. And so when he finally writes his letters, this pops right up in there. He says, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because this is to what you were called. You know, when we're willing to speak truth or live truth, and the people who are opposing us or the people we think are destroying things, we're able to love them and still call them out. We're able to be people who are authentic. That's a powerful, powerful, powerful thing. Now, here's the deal with me and you. Probably none of us really feel capable of this. I don't, It's like, Jesus says all this stuff, and dude, I screw this up every day, I get online and straighten out all those people who are stupid, right? And I give it to them, man, and I don't know. Then I delete, because I'm so bad at this. And I want to tell you something that's so important. In all of our mistakes, do you know Jesus trusts you with this? Wait, think about that for a moment. Jesus trusts us with this. He knows we're going to not bat anywhere close to 1,000. He knows that we're just learning how to love. He knows that we're learning how to be authentic. Sometimes you ever think about those disciples, we have all these stories in the book of Acts about the disciples, and you ever read about the disciples and you go, are you kidding me? Those guys are still clueless. They walked with Jesus for 3 years and they still do stupid stuff. And they do that, and I think, how did he trust them? Jesus has brought this message from God. He's going to return to the Father. He's going to say to Peter and James right here, you're in charge. What? That's insane. But he does trust us. He does trust us because he leads us along. And here's one of the reasons he trusts us. It was kind of tucked in this passage that we read today when he's talking about all the persecution and stuff. I love this. He says, whenever they hand you over, now in that setting, he's talking about them being handed over to authorities who could arrest them. He says, whenever they hand you over, don't worry about how you will speak, what you will say, because what you can say will be given to you at that moment. You aren't doing the talking, but the Spirit of my Father is doing the talking through you. You see, when we choose to authentically live out the message of Christ, even in our weakness and even in the way we mess up all the time, he says, I'll use you. Your life will be my words, and I trust you. One of the things I want us to feel today, one of the things I want us to know is that we are his ambassadors. He trusts us with this. And we have to quit looking at our imperfection and allow his life to flow through us. I say purity isn't perfection. You know what purity really is? It's the willingness to admit my imperfection. It's the willingness to admit my lack and my total dependence on God. Like he's sending me out in the world and says, don't even take a walking stick. Don't take an extra shirt. Don't take extra sandals. Don't take any money. I got you here. He trusts us in our world and in our culture to be the face and the words of Christ. And then I love what he said. If this could just guide us in how we want to be Christ's ambassadors. He said this. He said, freely you have received, now freely give. Man, when I read that, I think, what have I received from God through Jesus Christ? I've received forgiveness. I've received encouragement. I've received his name. I've received inclusion. I have received so much. And he's just saying, Phil, or put your own name in there. What you've been given, give. Forgiveness, inclusion, grace. Oh, I've had a lot of grace given to me. Give a lot of grace. You freely received, freely give. That's what makes us his ambassadors.